I desire a testimony of all my life. You start out being raised religious, and then you grow up and see the flaws in that. But I discovered the Abraham tapes a few years back, and this last year I've been living alone out in Montana, away from almost all humanity. And I've listened to a lot of the tapes, and it gives me a peaceful feeling. But I desire, how do we get the testimony that, I mean, I've read the I Am series, of so many different things, and I just want to have you expound on a little bit, with no disrespect, but how do I get a testimony that this is the universal truth that I'm seeking?
Well, we love the nature of your question because you've come right to the heart of what we know to be, and that is, it is an individual effort and an individual discovery. In other words, we want you to take not one other word for it. We want you to line up your energy deliberately with something, feel your way into vibrational compliance with it, and then watch what must be the result of that until you show yourself the absolute correlation between what you think and how you feel and what manifests in your experience.
I already have. I was just looking for something to tell other people who ask me about it, because they see, I was a road musician for 25 years, and I'm involved with a large family and a lot of people, and when some of them see me go to something, then they ask these questions. It's hard for me to explain, but that feeling, the gut feeling or the little voice or whatever, I've known it the first time I heard it. It's so simple, it's so easy, it's hard.
Well, actually, it's easier to teach to those like you, not teach but remind, because in your creative work, you've already discovered that alignment. In other words, when you find something that you focus upon and it feels good as you focus upon it, you can feel the power and the clarity pouring through you. And so it's easier for those like you who have discovered it maybe under different titles to recognize it when it is resonating within you. The problem with trying to find perfect words to give to anyone, here is the biggest problem with it. Unless they are asking, they cannot receive an answer. Mm-hmm. And so if you're trying to answer questions that have not been asked, it is sort of like trying to push a noodle. In other words, it doesn't work out very well. But the other thing that happens is that very often a person who may need it the very most, in other words, let's say you know someone who is in terrific need of alignment, and you know that they are because they don't feel good. They are complaining to you, or they are having discomfort in some way, and they're almost always the first person that you want to explain to them what you've come to understand. But they are so involved in step one, they cannot even begin to softly relax into step three. And so if you're wanting to help others and help them to really understand, here is the process that we would apply, because you're a teacher to the very core of your being. In other words, you can feel that. You have come forth to uplift, and you have found ways of doing it. But when you are doing it on an individual basis, here is the best thing that we know. Remember that what you are trying to assist them in doing is reconnecting with who they really are. And you can't blame someone into connection. You have to sort of love them into connection. Esther just returned from visiting her family. And as she listens to them talking endlessly about things she knows that they do not want, she cannot begin to find the beginning place for them. In other words, she left saying, it's hopeless. I cannot even begin to find the place. And in that, she just felt horrible. And after she relaxed a little bit, we said, Esther, as you see them as they are, and it gives you this pain as you see them as they are, you're not only not helping them, but you're not helping yourself, and now you're using them as your excuse not to feel good. If you're going to think about them, you have to find a better way of thinking about them. And so at first Esther said, well, I just won't think about them, because there was no way she could think about them. It was too much negative, too activated. But then she found herself wanting to think about them and wanting to feel good, and so very deliberately and very diligently she began finding a list of positive aspects. And it took nearly 2 days before she could regain her balance in finding the positive aspects. And now we say she has a fighting chance of focusing upon her parents and feeling connected to source energy at the same time, but it was a little bit of a wild ride for a while. Now the question that we can feel from you, and the answer that we really want to give to you and to Esther and to anyone else who is in this situation, is you cannot let another and their needs supersede your own. Because if you do, you lose your balance. So nothing is more important than that I feel good, which means I may not be able to think about you for a while, which feels selfish, but if I lose my footing, then I've got nothing to give you see. So when you begin to discover that you can feel good under all conditions and you practice your balance, then you can reach in and find a pleasant thought and dart out, and reach in and find a pleasant thought and dart out. When you are able to hold someone as your object of attention and feel good at the same time that you're doing it, they benefit. And on some level, they recognize that there is advantage to your relationship. And so you're understanding that. That's why people come to you. They see you. You keep wanting to get further and further off into isolation, and people want to come to you because they recognize you as someone that gives them something that they're reaching for. And so our recommendation is take them in small doses. Talk to them as much as you can, as long as you're feeling good while you're talking to them. And trust that they're making their lives work in the way that they're making their lives work. And just teach through the power of your example.
I really don't worry about them because I know they're all okay.
Yes.
The bottom line.
Yes.
And I just play them the Abraham tapes and let them listen to them and just comment.
One other thing that we'd like to give to you, because it is undoubtedly something that gets stuck in there somewhere, and that is that as you find alignment, and you found alignment long before you found Abraham. In other words, you've been reaching for alignment for a long time and discovering it and being in alignment more sometimes than others, but predominantly in alignment. As others watch you from the outside, they have all kinds of assumptions about where your alignment comes from. They think that your alignment comes from your success, rather than understanding that your success comes from your alignment. And so it's hard for you to teach them what you know when they think that they don't have access to your life. That's the biggest thing that you're dealing with there, is where you're wanting to help them to understand that your well-being is a byproduct of your alignment, every bit of it. You see? Yes.
How did this whole thing begin? In the beginning there was God.
Yes, but God in the beginning was far different than that which we are calling God now is, because God is so much further expanded.
Right, but there was a beginning. I mean, that's always been hard for me to understand, clear back as a child, is there's no beginning, there's no end. We always were and we always will be.
Well, the easiest way to explain it, or maybe the best excuse we have for not explaining it, is we're all pointed forward. In other words, the new thought is born out of what is now. And as we turn our attention to the new thought, then we expand joyously with the new thought. And in truth, we cannot look back, because we cannot reclaim the vibration that was before where we are now. And so those who have been tuned into this energy that translate it by saying there was no beginning and there is no ending, that's the best description they can do with this ongoing energy from where you stand. In other words, those actually are extremely accurate words. Let's take a simple thought or an idea and ponder it for a moment. In the moment that any consciousness, now this is where your question is, what was the first consciousness? But let's leave that behind just for a moment. So here is a consciousness having a thought. And in the moment that that thought begins to offer a vibration, now there is a difference between the vibrating thought and the thought that was thought right before that thought vibrated. So there is vibrational difference between the two thoughts and vibrational perspective. So now this thought, which has become an immediate thinker, can now perceive that thought as that thought can perceive that thought. And in that process, there is born yet another thought. And yet another thought, and yet another thought. And the expansion is so fast and so quick. In other words, you think that it is amazing to watch cells replicate in a petri dish. You should see what thoughts are doing. And so the thinker thinks the thought, now the thought becomes a thinker. And that thinker thinks a thought, and that thought becomes a thinker, which thinks a thought. And so it is just exponentially exploding. And at the basis of all of it, this energy or stream of well-being. So you say, where did the stream get started? And we say, within everything there is that which is an absence of it. And that is the duality of your universe that exists. And so for something to exist, there has to be an awareness of the absence of it, and the absence of it is what makes its existence possible. Interesting, isn't it? And so then just that perspective continues to cause it to expand. And so now when you speak of that which is God, we say God has been expanding right here in this room as together we are taking thought beyond that which it has been before.
A lot of people don't understand when they talk about God and you say, well, we're God too. It's a little hard for them to understand.
There are a number of reasons for that. The biggest reason is as you look out even into your physical environment, you just have to be knocked over by the extraordinary nature of it. And as man, you know, you can't even scrape enough dirt together, let alone launch it into orbit in some way. In other words, so there is a certain amount of humility that comes just from perceiving as you perceive. You know there must be something bigger, something grander, something more than what you are. And in that acknowledgement, often you assume yourself as substandard or less than, rather than understanding that you're a part of. That's why we talk endlessly about reaching for that feeling that lets you know that in this moment you are an extension of that. Because, to be lined up with that source and using the power of the specifics of what you are focused upon, there's no greater, more exhilarating feeling than that. Whether it is scientific or musically creative or artistic or medical, it doesn't matter what endeavor you are focused upon. To be out here on the leading edge, fully focused with source energy pouring through you, God is in his heyday, or all that is in its heyday, however you want to approach it or call it. This is where it's happening out here in this culminating now powerful moment.
Once I learned to understand the now and live in the now, it just all clicks. And that's what it's about. So the religions and everything, that just come from mass consciousness of just man not having adequate ways of explaining the non-physical?
Well, religion has come about. There are two ways of approaching this. There are many who, through time, in fact, all have the ability, while all do not experience it, of translating broader perspective. In other words, you all are extensions of that, and you are all never separated from that, and you all have access to that. And so, as man asks questions, the answers always come. And some get in a place where they can clearly articulate the answers. But what happens is, the answers must always be articulated through your basis of belief. As we are expressing to you here, we cannot speak to you other than through the perspective that you understand. So even in the word God, there is huge distortion, because when the word God is thrown out, it activates all kinds of vibrations within you that are nothing like that which we know that which you are calling God is, you see. So the religion is created very much as this body of work has been created, although Jerry and Esther are determined that it will never be a religion. But after they are dead, it probably will be. As this energy is flowing through and it is articulated, you could call that the forming of religion. And the basis of it is the asking and the answering. But there is another basis of religion that is more what you are feeling and speaking about here, and that goes like this. We are assuming the place of a physical human religionist. I really want to live a good life, and I really want to be of value, and I really want to feel good. And as I see that, I do feel good, so I encourage it. But as I see that, I don't feel good, so I discourage it. And I have not really come to know that I can choose and feel and therefore allow. I still believe that my happiness is dependent upon the circumstances, so I become a controller of circumstances. And to the degree that I can control things outside of me, to that degree, I have this elusive dream of my own personal joy. And that is the basis of most religion. They are well-meaning, they want to feel good, they want you to live good, but they believe that they must control circumstances. And then it just goes on and on and on and on and on. It's impossible, you see.
I just want to say I'm very thankful for the Abraham teachings, and once I learned how to be happy and allow life's just killer and amazing.
Oh, you're just getting started.
Oh, I know.
What is before you is unfathomable.
I'm counting on that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, indeed. What more?